Rishus, Choshev Rosh HaKoil, Choshev B'nai Torah. Today's shir is about the historic overview of Metzitah B'Peh. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the ongoing lawsuit in New York City presently between many Jewish organizations and Mohalim against the city of New York, which is trying to regulate the mitzvah of Milah, and especially to eradicate Metzitah B'Peh. And there's a lot of information that's being disseminated through the media, which some of it is not so accurate, some of it. And it probably is a good idea to have some sort of a historic overview of really what went on about Metzitah B'Peh, what it's all about. In all of Torah, Nevi'im, Uksuvim, there's no mention of Metzitah altogether, actually. The Torah says you do Bayoim Hashmini Imoil B'Sar Alosoi. On the 8th day you circumcise a newborn. It doesn't say anything about how you do it. And the Gemara, the Mishnayos, does give us some guidelines. The first place that we find it mentioned in Torah Shebal Peh is a Mishnah in Masechta Shabbos in the 19th Perek, the second Mishnah, where the Mishnah says, Oisin kol tzorchei milah b'Shabbos. One is to do all the necessary components of the mitzvah of Milah on Shabbos, the same as you do during the weekdays. And the Mishnah goes on to explain, it says, Moyalin, upoirin, umoitzitzin. Moyalin means you remove the foreskin, the prepuce, the orla. Upoirin, you uncover the glands by folding back the mucosa. And moitzitzin means you suck. It doesn't say how to go about it. This is what the Mishnah says. It doesn't say how the Metzitah has to be done. The Gemara in Shabbos, this Mishnah is in Shabbos Kuf Lamed Gimel Lamed Aleph and Lamed Beis. The Gemara says that Rav Papa tells us, Hay umna deloi mayitz sakantahu mavrinale. A mohel that does not do the Metzitah, he's causing danger to the child, and you fire that mohel. That mohel is supposed to be removed from his position. That's what the Gemara says. It would seem from the Gemara that the purpose of Metzitah is it's a medical procedure. It has nothing to do with the mitzvah itself. There are many that learn that in fact that is what that it's only a inyan of sakona. There are those that do learn that it's part of the mitzvah itself. Now, in rabbinic literature, we don't find any discussion or any arguments about how it's to be performed. And until the 21st century, you won't find anybody that's questioning how it was performed. The way it was performed, as we find in all the literature, both in the rabbinic literature and in the periodicals and in all whatever there is that's available to us today, everybody agrees that the way it was done is that the mohel put his mouth right over the Mekoim Hamila and he sucked out the blood. This is the way it was performed in all the generations. The first place that we find in available literature that there was any controversy over how this should be done or if it should be changed is in 1831. That's the first time we find that there is an issue about it. There was a Dr. Wolfers in Lamphorn, Germany, who was a professor, and he published a manual for Moyalim how to perform the mitzvah of Milah. And in that manual, this Dr. Wolfers writes that the practice of Metzitah B'Peh is despicable and it should be eradicated, and it's not hygienic, and it's not necessary, and he wants to do away with the Metzitah completely. That's the first place we find in literature that there was something published on the subject. Some years later, in about 1835 or so, there is the rabbi, the chief rabbi of Vienna, who was a Talmud of the Chassam Sofer. What he did was he wrote a letter to the Chassam Sofer, and he published it. It's published in the Chuvas Yad Elozar, in Siman Nun Hey, and in there, what he writes is as follows. There was a Dr. Mannheimer in Vienna who it seems was the chief physician of the hospital in Vienna. And he came to the chief rabbi, and he tells him that we have a major problem. What's the problem? It seems that one of the Mohalim in Vienna, many of the children that he circumcised developed some kind of a skin rash, and he claimed that some of them even died. And they filed suit in the local government to have Mohalim cease doing circumcisions, and only doctors should be able to do circumcisions. So he writes to the Chassam Sofer, his Rebbe, that what do we do about this problem? And he writes the doctor, it seems that they tested that Mohel to see if he carries any kind of a disease, and they found him that he does not have any disease. However, Lamechash Miboye, you don't know, maybe. But regardless whether he does carry a disease or not, the government wants to ban ritual circumcision completely. Therefore, what do we do? So the Chassam Sofer writes him back. At least this is what's published in the Yad HaLozer, because in the Chuvas Chassam Sofer we don't find this tshuva at all. We find it in the Yad HaLozer, in this chief rabbi of Vienna, in his Sefer. There's a tshuva from the Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer writes that the Gemara does not say how to go about doing Metzitah. It says it's a sakona to do Metzitah if you can figure out a way to accomplish doing the Metzitah without doing it orally. If it sucks out the blood from the circumcision area, it's fine, and it's only mishum sakona. And if you can take care of the problem of sakona by having it with any kind of other device to get it sucked out from the mokam hamila, then there's no problem. So then why don't you just change the system, and you won't have the government won't have any issues anymore, and they'll continue to allow you to do circumcisions. This is the tshuva that the Yad HaLozer had. So what he did was, of course, he went and had it filed, I guess, in the court briefing, and of course the Reform Jews got hold of this tshuva the Chassam Sofer, and they had so they said, okay, from now on, forget about Metzitah altogether. If it's only mishum sakona, the Chassam Sofer says. So even though the Chassam Sofer says to do it in a different way, but they said, what if it's only mishum sakona? The doctors today say there's no problem with sakona, so let's eradicate the Metzitah completely. This is what transpired in Vienna. P.S. I don't have to tell you, these things tend to evolve. From there, in, let's see, it was 1844, the Tiferes Yisrael on the Mishnayos was published. And on this Mishnah, he asked the same question. He says, we find in Chazal many times that doctors have the right to decide in issues between life and death, Yom Kippur. If a doctor says that the choila needs to eat, it's a chorus to eat on Yom Kippur, the doctor says the choila needs to eat. It's permissible. We don't question if the medical profession says it's fine. Then this is the question that the Tiferes Yisrael himself asked. So why don't we do away with Metzitah altogether? So the Tiferes Yisrael writes that the doctors do agree that there is some medical benefit in sucking the blood out of the mokam hamila. So the fact that they say it doesn't have to be, or the other problems that there could be diseases that are transmitted by the procedure, that doesn't mean that the doctors say that there's no problem with sakona. The sakona still is there, and therefore we don't listen to the doctors. We should continue the procedure of doing Metzitah. However, he writes a very interesting thing, that being that it's questionable if you do or don't need it, on Shabbos, if you wouldn't really need Metzitah b'peh, Metzitah is a malacha d'oraisa, and therefore you shouldn't do as strong as a Metzitah on Shabbos like you do during the weekdays. This is what the Tiferes Yisrael writes. This Nakuda was not accepted in any of the Poskim from the Tiferes Yisrael on. They don't make use of this in any way. Shabbos Metzitah is done the same like it's done in the weekdays. When this tshuva the Chassam Sofer started circulating, there was all the Talmidei Chassam Sofer at the time who are very annoyed with this, and they have different reactions to the tshuva of the Chassam Sofer. There are those that claim that the tshuva is a fabrication of the rabbi in Vienna, and it has nothing to do with the Chassam Sofer. One of the Talmidei Chassam Sofer, Reb Chaim Tzvi Mannheimer, in his Ein Abdoilach, writes in his Tshuva Sefer that it's a fabrication, it doesn't exist. And the Aderes, who was Rav in Panovich and in Mir, and later in Yerushalayim, he was the father-in-law of Rav Kook. He also writes that it's a fabrication, and it's not true. The Chassam Sofer never would have written anything like that. Truthfully, the style of the tshuva doesn't really fit in with the Chassam Sofer style altogether, but it's an editorial. Besides the fact that we know, those that are familiar with a little bit of Hungarian history know that the Chassam Sofer was the greatest opponent to the Reform movement. Now, what his intention was, there's many different versions of what happened really, how this tshuva came about. The Bnei Yissaschar, in a kuntras which is called Ma'archos Yisrael, which is published in the Stei Chemed, he writes that he swears. This is what he writes. I'll read you the lashon of the. He writes like this: Achineni nishba, I swear, sheshoma hashemeya, the one who heard it, v'to, and he made a mistake. And he writes that really what happened was that the Yad Elozar asked the Chassam Sofer to write something that he could use against the Reform movement, that they shouldn't eradicate Mitzvah Milah completely, to be able to show them that there's no danger in Mitzvah Milah. This is what he writes. Then he writes, V'ani ba'atzmi mesupik b'chol zeh. I even have my doubts about all of this. Im yotza michtav zeh mimoran bal Chassam Sofer. He has his doubts whether the Chassam Sofer actually wrote this letter. V'im gam yotza, and even if he did write the letter, b'vadai chozar boy, he for sure changed his mind about it. Midalohevi b'psaka b'tshuvas Chassam Sofer, because we know that the Chassam Sofer was the one who chose which letters should be published in the tshuvas. And this letter did not make it into the tshuvas. At the same time, in history, as this was all transpiring, in 1846, which was only 10 years after the Yad Elozar's tshuva was written, the Rabbi Yankiv Etliger, who was commonly known as the Baal Orach Lener, and his Shilas Tshuva Sefer is the Binyan Tzion, he has two tshuvas about this Yad Elozar, Siman Chav Gimel and Siman Chav Daled in his Tshuva Sefer, and he very vehemently opposes the change, and he writes that aside from the Sakona, Metzitah is halacha l'Moshe Sinai, that's the way it should be performed, and it has been done ever since Moshe Rabbeinu gave the mitzvah Milah. That is the way it was performed. It's halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and aside from the Inyone Sakona Shaboy, it's an integral part of the mitzvah Milah. Now, in the Sifrei Kabbalah and the Sifrei Mechker, the Sforim that deal with philosophy and mystic, they do have a very prominent position on Metzitah B'Peh. A lot of it is way above and beyond our heads, but the Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim does say that the reason we have Mitzvah Milah altogether, we know when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created Adam Harishon, he created him perfectly circumcised. It was only after the Chet of Eitz Hadas that he Nimshecha or Losoi, that he became an oral. And the mitzvah Milah, says the Rambam, the purpose of the mitzvah is a tikkun to correct the sin of the Eitz Hadas. And being that he took the fruit with his hands and he ate it with his mouth, mitzvah Milah is to be performed with your hands and with your mouth. You do the chituch and the priya with your hands, and you do the metzitza with your mouth. This is what the Rambam writes in the Moreh Nevuchim. Many of the Sifrei Kabbalah, also, one of the great Kabbalists was the father of the Chidah, Rabbi Avraham Azuloi. He also writes, this is one of his many, many reasons. The Maram Zakut, which was one of the Gurei Arizal, also has many, many reasons why the metzitza has to be done with the mouth. The Radbaz, who was also a big Mekubal, writes in his Metzudas David and his Tamei HaMitzvahs, he writes an interesting thing. He says the mouth that does Metzitah b'peh would not be shoylet on rimo v'soileo. In other words, worms will not eat up his mouth. This is what he writes in there. That the inyan of doing Metzitah b'peh. Again, the Chassam Sofer, if that tshuva is true that the Chassam Sofer actually did write it, he is not concerned with Kabbalah, because when it comes to halacha or when it comes to sakona, we stick with the strict halacha. That's what it seems to say in this tshuva. But the Mekubalim do have major issues with this.
The discussion till now is to do Metzitah at all or b'peh?
Well, we're soon going to see. The issue, they wanted to do it, the Chassam Sofer writes about doing it manually, not doing it b'peh, doing it some other way. The Yad al-Lazar took it a step further, and it seems that, if it's Mishum Sakona, we should listen to the doctors. The Chassam Sofer doesn't write that. One of the many tainas on the Yad al-Lazar is this, that he took the tshuva of Chassam Sofer, and since the Chassam Sofer is only Mishum Sakona, well, if we listen to the doctors, then maybe we don't have to do it all together. But the Chassam Sofer does write very clearly, if the tshuva was from the Chassam Sofer, in that letter, the Chassam Sofer writes very clearly that the doctors have to testify that whatever method they use to do the Metzitah, whatever they propose should be used to do the Metzitah, does it as strong and as well as Metzitah b'peh. This, the Chassam Sofer ends off the tshuva. They have to testify that it works that way, and they seem to want to do away with this. The Binyan Tzion, Rav Ettlinger, he is tainas that it's a chelik of the mitzvah smila, and you can't change it in any way. You can't change it at all. In 1845, well, actually in 1844, there was a major convention of the Reform movement in Braunschweig, and they did many takonas that they made, the Reform movement. One of their many takonas that they proposed and they passed was to abolish Metzitah completely. That was in 1844. In 1845, there was a gentleman in Amsterdam by the name of Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Leren. He published a pamphlet called Toiras HaKanois. Toiras HaKanois and in there he published many tshuvas from many Gedolei Yisrael against abolishing Metzitah b'peh. There's many names which won't ring a bell to most of us. The more famous ones that we're familiar with was Reb Shamshon of Fall Hirsch, and the Ksaf Sofer, which the Chassam Sofer's son, and the Maria Assad. And that tshuva of the Maria Assad is published in this Toiras HaKanois, but he also published it in the Shailos Tshuvas Yehuda Yala, which is the Maria Assad's tshuva sefer, was one of the Gedolei Hungary, which was together with the Chassam Sofer in what's known as the Tailung, if you're familiar with this, where the Chassam Sofer said that they should separate from the Reform movement, and they made separate kehillas at that time, and the government recognized the separate kehillas, that the Reform movement is a separate kehillah from the Orthodox community. And the Reform movement obviously tried many ways to try and undermine different things in Torah, as we see today we see the results of how far they've slid down. But then they were just in the beginning stages, and they tried to do away with whatever they could. They tried to use small things which eventually grew into more serious things. So these are the tshuvas, and he also writes that it's halacha l'Moshe Misinai. There are many that write that it's Metzitah b'peh halacha l'Moshe Misinai, and the Maria Assad, and he has many rayas that he brings. It's a very long tshuva. And the Maram Shik was also a Talmud of the Chassam Sofer. He writes in his tshuva sefer that the tshuva of the Chassam Sofer was hoira shohi, so it was just to save the situation in Vienna, but he did not mean it. V'horaya, he didn't publish it together with the rest of his tshuvas in his tshuva sefer. In 1886, the Reb Shamshon of Fall Hirsch published his tshuva on the matter, and I will read it to you. He writes it's published. He published it in a periodical at the time, but it was later published in his tshuva sefer called Shemesh Marpeh. And he writes as follows: Ma'yase ishel yirei elikim. Question: what does a God-fearing Jew do? Im yikra ish mikata chadoshim, if he's called by one of the new group, I guess by the Reform movement, if they invite him, lo moles banoi, a Reformed Jew invites a God-fearing Mohel to circumcise his son, what should he do? Ach, but he says, one condition, I'll let you do the bris, b'tanai levilti asoy sa metzitah. I'll let you do the bris on one condition, that you don't perform metzitah on my son. Hayiten mokoim lebakosha kosu, should he fulfill the request, or should he refuse to do the bris altogether? This is the question. So he says like this: everything that has been said and been repeated in our time against the process of metzitah, hakoil dvorim b'telim. It's all dvorim b'telim, means words of naught. Haloi b'hiyois ribevois alfa Yisrael yachta b'mei kedem. When tens of thousands of Jews were together in days of yore, our forefathers had in 1 year yediyos, knowledge, al yedei anisoyan, through practical application, binyone hamila v'hametzitza, elef po'omim yoiser milechol roifes manenu, 1,000 times more than all of the current doctors, b'chol shnois chayim, in all the years of their life. B'kerev tfutzes hameinu, amongst our people. V'im chazal hoyrunu, and if our sages taught us heyois bitla metzitza sakona liyeled animal, that doing away, abolishing metzitza will cause danger to the circumcised infant, we can't have any doubts about the truth of their words. And I think that you're also making a mistake, that this is the one he's writing the letter to. Loimar, to say that the smart men of our generation had the audacity to say that doing the metzitza causes danger to the child. I didn't hear about this. At most, they said they said that there's no need for the healing of the infant, and we should abolish it, since we see because we see many children came to the sakona because of the metzitza, and because of our many sins, we can't deny that this is not true, this is not false. Mohel, it's not for sure false. It's true. They got sick. V'gam nistaknu yolodim, and they also became in a sakona, those children shenimoilu that were circumcised, v'nismatza chapura samila yedei hamoil, and the metzitza was done through the moil. Ochein, however, loibo haro hazois, it's true that they got sick and they came lidei sakona, but this evil did not happen al yedei iker ma'isa metzitza. It didn't happen by the act of metzitza per se. Ela machmas shehoya hamoil ish tmeis fosayim, because the Mohel had unclean lips, asher mursa arsis befiv, poisons in his mouth, asher kona, that he acquired belechtoi from going bedarke pritzas hasnus, because he was involved in sexual conduct which was not proper, which caused him to carry, which syphilis was really the problem at the time. Uneshikas anoshim koela al chabura, and such people that put their mouth on the wound, these are called the kisses of the enemy, hayordim chadrei movis, which go down to the depths of death. Instead of putting the blame on the words of the sages, hakadoshim v'hatoirim of the Chazal, instead these people should be warning every father, he should be careful when he chooses a Mohel. He should make sure he should only choose kiyim al yedei ish yirei elikim asher darkei b'kodesh. He should only use a Mohel that's an erlich yid, and he acts in ways of kedusha and doesn't get himself involved in those kind of things that cause venereal diseases. bedas loitor, and then you don't have to be concerned if he's acting properly. You don't have to accuse him that maybe he's not. And this seems to me, says Reb Shamshon of Hirsch, that this is a very clear responsibility in our generation, our generation, our poor generation, that every individual that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him lekayim mitzvahs Avram Avinu b'bnoi hayaled loy, everyone that HaKadosh Baruch Hu blessed him with a child tamal, he should make sure that he gets a moel yiresh mayim, and a moel that doesn't carry venereal diseases. Ochein, however, ma yasa moel, what should a moel do? Yirei alikim b'boy ish oyhev chadoshos, when somebody comes who loves the new enlightenment, he comes to him, lo moles b'noi, to circumcise his son. What should he do? Ach betnai shel yasa metzitah. Lanias dati, says Reb Shamshon of Hirsch, mutav loy, better is for him limshoy ches yodoi, to pull away his hand v'lo yomoloi, who when he shouldn't be the moil. Shouldn't do the bris. Somebody comes to you and says to you, circumcise my son, but I don't want you to do a metzitah. He should pull away. V'lo yavor al divrei chazal, and he shouldn't transgress the words of the chazal shegozru, that they were going to lahaver moil the loimites. They said a moil that doesn't do mitzvah, you fire him. Haloi loy all of hamitzvah ki aloav. It's not the moil's mitzvah to circumcise the child. It's his father's mitzvah. Vim hu lo yirtza lasus hamitzitza lasus hamitzvah kasher tzivonu chazal. If he doesn't want to do it like the chazal commanded it, ein la moil losur ba'avuroi memaglei tzedek. There's no reason why the moil has to step aside from the righteous path. Ulahachzik bezeh and to strengthen the hands of the sinful. Rak yorim degel haTorah, he should lift up the banner of the Torah, vayira. That's b'moyachenu b'nei Yisrael. Umimenu yilmudu acherim. From him, others should learn la'amod al mishmartam, to stand on guard, mishmeres hakodesh, the holy guard, kasher hi mursha lonu me'aviseinu nishmos nedim, like it was a Yerusha to us from our forefathers. Because in this matter, it's my opinion that Sotku Divrei Adoini Moiri V'Rabbi Hagoyin Hamanoyach Yankiv Yukav Etlingen Zal, which is the Baal Orach Lener, which in his Shuvah de Binyasim, I say he's right. Asher Ein Metzitah Kiyim Bepeh. No Metzitah should be done only orally. The Ein Spug and using a sponge or Shar Mine Tachbula or any other kind of way, poil ha-metzitza doesn't accomplish the metzitza la-mitzvahs la-matzos adam im-koimus v'rechoikim, to extract the blood from the far-off places, kedivrei ha-Rambam, like the words of the Rambam. V'Hashem yaro aleinu ruach tara, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu should pour on us a spirit of cleanliness, v'yireh, in Yireh Shamayim, shelo yikru v'oid anoshim, she'enam hagunim la'avoid avodosoi, that those people that are not proper shouldn't do his service. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give you the merit that you should be zoiche to uphold and to fulfill the guard of the mitzvahs. Altila kenavshe v'nevesh mechabdoi moikiroi hakot neshamshem ben ladoini yovik void moreinu harav Rafael Hirsch from Frankfurt Zeichet Tzadik Livrocha. So Reb Shamshon Rafael Hirsch says, don't do the bris. If this is what they want to do, don't do the bris. This happened, this tshuva, it was printed, this tshuva was printed in 1886. Now in 1888, 2 years later, there was a Reverend Sal Levy, who was a Mohel, and it seems that many of the, or some of the children that he circumcised were dying from disease. This is what happened. Now we know already from Rav Shamshon Rafael Hirsch why, but at the time they didn't want to make an issue of this, and so there was in England, he was a Mohel in England, this fellow, and they convened a major convention what to do about this, and they assumed that what he had was tuberculosis. That would seem to be the problem, and it was a communicable disease, and they said, okay, from now on you don't do Metzitah anymore, you'll just wash off, in case the sakona is that sterilization of the instruments was maybe a problem, so they should just wash off the Mekoim Hamila, and this was the consensus at this particular convention. This was in 1888. In 1889, a year later, was published in the Hamelitz, which was a periodical, from a Dr. Shmuel Cohen. He writes that kids were dying from the Metzitah from venereal diseases. That's what he writes. So, a year later, in 1900, there was a reverend in London, Reverend Alexander Tertis, published a book called Dambris, and he invented a suction device which works without using your mouth altogether. And it seems what he did was he wrote how it works, and he sent the shaila around to everybody in the whole world, all the gedolim in the whole world, the rabbonim, the rosh yeshivas, wherever you got anybody of note in the entire world, and he collected the tshuvas, and the ones that agreed with him he published. He also has diagrams of how it works, and he writes how much it costs. He advertises it in the book, and each country exactly what it costs. It's rather expensive. He writes, but you're getting a very handsome case along with it, and the price includes shipping and handling. For America, it's $4.50. That's what it costs. Now, in there, he has haskomas. The two major haskomas that he has are, one is Rabbi Yankov Yosef, who was the chief rabbi of New York. He also has haskoma in there from the Cheshek Shloima, which was the Dayan in Vilna, which is Agos we have in the back of the Gemara, one of the big Oinim of the time. He writes that the doctors say that it's a problem with doing Metzitah, and Chazal say you have to do Metzitah. If the device works like Metzitah b'peh, no problem, you can use this device to do Metzitah. That's what the Cheshek Shloima writes, and Rabbi Yankov Yosef writes this, and these are his big trump cards. Interestingly, Reb Shmuel Salant, which was the chief rabbi of the Ashkenazic Jews in Yerushalayim at the time, he has a letter in there from him also. So if you don't read it, you think he's maskim to him. But if you read it, you see he writes, I don't understand why you sent me this shaila. The chief rabbi of London at the time was Reb Nosson Adler, not Reb Nosson Adler, the Chassam Sofer's Rabbi, but later there was Reb Nosson Adler, who was the chief rabbi, and he wrote a sefer Nesina Lager, on Chumash, famous sefer. This Reb Nosson Adler, he's the Rav in London. Why are you sending me the shaila? Why don't you send him the shaila? Now, of course, Reb Nosson Adler's truth is not printed in there. He obviously didn't agree with him. He ends off the letter that you shouldn't be mevatel divrei Chazal. This is what he writes, Reb Shmuel Salant. In Yerushalayim, there was a kol koire which came out, which is a public announcement against changing Metzitah b'peh, and it's signed by the three Torah leaders in Yerushalayim at the time. One is Rabbi Yankov Elyasher, Rabbi Yankov Shol Elyasher, which was the chief rabbi of the Sephardic community. He signed it against being Meshana Metzitah b'peh. The other one is Reb Shmuel Salant himself. And the third one is the Torah's Chesed, Reb Shlomo Zalman Miladi, which was Demolz, the head of the Chassidim in Yerushalayim. So all three signed against being Meshana from doing Metzitah b'peh. But there is a letter in this book, in this Dambris book from Reverend Alexander Tertis, from the Aruch HaShulchan, and he says it's good to use the device. Interestingly, in the Aruch HaShulchan, which is also the same mechaber as the Aruch HaShulchan, he writes, and I'll read this to you. This is in Yeridei Simarei Samach Dalet Sif Yutes. He says, "V'achar priya yasa metzitza, v'zeu tikun hatinik, shemoites hamila befiv." You do metzitza by mouth. Now, in the Mishnah, it doesn't say how to do it. In the Gemara, it doesn't say how to do it. In the Rambam, in Perik Beis Halacha Beis of Hilchas Mila, he says you do the metzitza to remove the blood. It doesn't say dafka to do it with your mouth. It doesn't say to use that. The Torah and the Shulchan Aruch and Simarei Samach Dalet Sif Gimel do not say that it has to be done by mouth. It doesn't say. There are many Rishonim that do say it has to be done by mouth. One is the Klole Amila of Rabbi Yankov HaGoizer, which is about 1,000 years ago at the time of the Balei HaTosfos. He says exactly how to do it. You put your mouth over the Mekoim Hamili, describes it very, very, very definitively how you have to do it. The Klol HaMilah of Reb Gershon HaGoizer also says, in the time of the Rishonim, you find this. The Tanya Rabbosi, which is one of the Rishonim, Rabbeinu Yechiel, also says it has to be done by mouth. The Dishboli Holeket, the Avudram says it has to be done by mouth. The Levush, which was later already, many we find that say it has to be done by mouth. But here, the Aruch HaShulchan, who allegedly agrees with Alexander Tertis that you could do it with the machine, he says, "Shemoit samil b'fiv kedei she'etzi adam im koimos harachoikin kedei shelo yovel lidei sakon." Kach amru Chazal. The Chazal say this: "Da'ayumna d'loi ma'itz." If the Mohel doesn't do Metzitah, ma'avrinan le. The sakon will atinik because it causes danger to the child. U'moitzin yofa yofa she'yifsek adam, and you have to do a very strong Metzitah until the blood stops coming. V'dan you should know sheyesh bizmanenu. There are in those in our time she'imrim that say sheyoser toiv lasa Metzitah loy b'peh. That those in our time that say you shouldn't do it with your mouth, with some kind of a sponge that sucks up the blood, we won't listen to them. Okay? So I don't get it. This is the Aruch HaShulchan, which he himself published. And there it says in the book that the Aruch HaShulchan agreed with him. So I don't know, will the real Aruch HaShulchan please stand up? So it seems that this is more definitive, the Aruch HaShulchan, what he writes over here, than what Alexander Tertis writes in the book. But he has other haskamas there as well. Rabbi Tzal Ponevezher, who was Rav in Ponevezh, is also one of those that agreed. Rabbi Tzal Reuven Bengis says not to be mevatel a metzitza b'peh and chodosh osur min haTorah. It's all written in that letter published in his book. But if the government decrees to mevatel the metzitza, then it's better to do it with a keli than to be mevatel it completely. This is what he writes. Rebbe Posek, the Balkayres Habris, which was in Russia, he writes, Moshe Rabbeinu, they always did it metzitza b'peh, and even if Eliyahu would come and say, by the way, he published this letter in there too, by the way, this Alexander Tertis in the book, this letter, that's where I got it from. He writes from Eliyahu Posek. Besides in the Kairos Habris, he also writes very strong about this, but he published this letter from Rebbe Eliyahu Posek, that from the times of Moshe Rabbeinu, you have to do it dafka by mouth. Even if Eliyahu were to come and say that you should do the metzitza using some kind of a device, Ein Shaiman Levi wouldn't listen to him. If Eliyahu no come, we wouldn't listen to him. But if the government forbids you to doing metzitza, if they ban doing metzitza, and you don't have any other breda, that's the only time that you should do the metzitza b'kli. Now the Divrei Malkiel, which was Rav in Lomje, is one of the letters in there is from him as well. He writes that metzitza was dafka done b'peh, done orally. But if again the government wants to abolish it, then you be metzitza b'keli. If the device does the job as good as metzitza b'peh. Another one of those that he brings in the book is Reb Chaim Berlin, who was Rav in Moscow and Kobrin and later in Yerushalayim. He writes he's not maskam to the device that you should always use it standardly to be mavatal minig aviseinu me'olam. Only again if there's a chashash that the mohel might be sick or the child might be sick and there's a problem with transmitting disease, only in such an instance, if the device does the job like metzitza b'peh, then you could use this device. Interestingly, he wrote a letter to Reb David Karliner, who was then considered one of the Gedolei Hador, and Reb David Karliner writes him back, and this he published in the book, that I don't know anything about your device, but if you send me two of them, we'll check it out. This is what he writes. So he, of course, didn't send. He writes in the bottom, he didn't send those devices. He's asked him to send him two devices. He's going to check it out. He says, but since he asked him to send him the device, means that if the device works, it's good, then you could use it. And the doctors say, Dr. Tertis says that it works, so I don't have to send him the device. And he has a skoma that Dover Kalina agrees with him that you can use the device. This is what he uses. Interestingly, Rav David Kalina himself writes that you can't use the device. That's also printed in the Dover Kalina Sefer, that you can't use the device. But this is what he writes, this fellow. Now, this all transpired in 1900. That's when the book was published, in 1900. Now, around that time, the Stei Chemet was published. Now, the Stei Chemet has 62 pages of tshuvas from all the Rabbonim that ask are changing metzitza b'peh. One of the things he brings in there is this Marchos Yisrael from the Bnei Yissaschar, where he swears that the Chassam Sofer didn't mean that you should change the minig and not do Metzitah b'peh. He brings in there the tshuva of the Maramshik, but it's printed in the Maramshik in Yeridei Simulation Daled, where the Maramshik writes the Metzitah b'peh is Halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and we shouldn't be Mishana. And even if the doctors say that's not a sakona, by treifus, we don't listen to the doctors. The medical profession or science says that certain things are not considered treifus. It doesn't change the halacha. And even if it's only a minig, you still shouldn't do mila without Metzitah b'peh, because it has a din of arkas of the mesana. And I'll explain this. Arkas of the mesana means that we have minhagim which aren't necessarily a must that you have to do it. However, if the goy comes to you and tells you that I don't want you to do this, then even though there's only 3 cardinal sins that a person is required to give his life for, even a minig like changing the color of your shoelace, which was a minig that Yidden wore different color shoelaces than the goyim, if a goy were to come and tell you you have to change the color of your shoelace, and the goy says if you don't I'll shoot you, you have to tell the goy shoot, because if it's even it's a minig, if he's doing it lahaber aladas, he's doing it because he doesn't want you to do something, even if it's only a minig Yisrael. It's called arkas of the mesana. It's yehoreg v'al yavor. A person has to give his life for it. So the Maramshik writes this as one of the reasons why you can't change this. Now, amongst the other tshuvas that he brings from the Maram Zakut in his Sefer Ramaz that he writes there's soidas gedolim and Metzitah b'peh pi Kabbalah, and you can't change it. The Steichemer himself writes he's very doubtful Bechlal if the Chasofer ever wrote that letter, and if he wrote it Vavadai Chozer Boy, he didn't print it like many others wrote. In 1908, there was a tshuva published from Rav Kook about this subject. Now, Rav Kook's father-in-law, the Aderes, I don't know if you're familiar with the Aderes. The Aderes was he was brought to Yerushalayim to succeed Reb Shmuel Salant. Reb Shmuel Salant was like 100 years old or so, and they decided that they have to take a younger Rav and I guess break him in so that when Reb Shmuel Salant passes on, so they had to find one of the Gedolei Hador in Eretz Ashkenaz. So they took him. He was Rav in Mir before that, and before that Rav in Ponevezh. So they hired him as Yerushalayim Rav. It turned out that he died before Reb Shmuel Salant, so he never ended up succeeding Reb Shmuel Salant as Rav of Yerushalayim. But he was one of the great Gedolim, and in his Sefer Man Eliyahu, he has a very, very strong tshuva against changing Metzitah b'peh. And he is referring, it seems, to what he saw in this Reverend Alexander Tertus's book that you can print. He doesn't write the name of the book, but he writes, you can print for me 30 tshuvas of Rabbanim. It means nothing to me, and you can't change it. This is what he writes, and especially there he doesn't like what one of them wrote altogether. But he has a very strong tshuva, and you don't change from doing Metzitah b'peh. But Rav Kook, by the way, and he has 3 tshuvas on the subject. The question that the Tiferes Yisrael poses, that if the doctors have an emonus, Chazal say we trust the doctors, and if the doctors say that today it's not a sakona anymore to omit doing Metzitah b'peh, and on the contrary, it might be a sakona to do Metzitah b'peh, because the Tiferes Yisrael writes, because what happens is when you do Metzitah, you cause the blood to start flowing, and then you have an issue of stopping the bleeding, which is true. If you don't do Metzitah, it doesn't necessarily have to bleed. If you do Metzitah, it starts bleeding. Now, the Binyan Sian in his tshuva claims that the mitzvah of dam bris is only accomplished through the Metzitah. Whatever blood comes out from the circumcision itself, without doing Metzitah, you're not mekayim the dam bris, which is a chelik of mitzvah smila. That's one of his tainas. Incidentally, what in fact is the sakona? Chazal don't tell us what the sakona is of not doing Metzitah. So there is numerous different proposals at what the possible sakona might be. I'll give you a number of those. And again, the fact that there's some people that proposed what the sakona might be doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't some other sakona that the Chazal knew of that they didn't tell us. If they didn't tell us, there's different possibilities. Rabbi Yankov HaGoyzer was one of the Rishonim which I mentioned before. He writes in his Klolei Hamila, it's because if you don't do the Metzitah, then there is blood in the opening of the wound that becomes coagulated, and that is really what causes the sakon. But the Rambam's son, the Rambam was a doctor, his son in the Sefer Hamaspik Loivdei Hashem, he writes that the purpose of the Metzitah is to do away with the swelling. If you don't do Metzitah, the site of the wound will swell, and that's what causes the sakona. And if you do Metzitah, it does away with the swelling. Incidentally, the Tiferes Yisrael, who probably did not see the Sefer Hamaspik Loivdei Hashem, both the Tiferes Yisrael and the Yad Elazar, the Rav and Veen, they both write that the purpose of the sakona is to do away with the swelling. Now, there was a Dr. Serhai in Riga who published a sefer called Bris Sholem, very large sefer, and Rav Kook praises him very strongly that he was a scholar and a competent physician. He's a medical doctor, this Dr. Serhai, and he writes in the book, he has a masterful scholarly work where he tus durach the parsha of Mila in general with all the lamdas, and he also claims, interestingly, that Metzitah b'peh is halacha l'Moshe Misina, I guess from the sources that he quotes, and he brings a very interesting raya that it has to be done dafke b'peh. There's a Mishnah in Masechta Kelim where he writes that the Mishnah says, it's Perik Ches Mishnah Yod Aleph Masechta Kelim. It says there in the Mishnah that when a person, it's referring to a situation where somebody got a burn, a lady got a burn, v'nosno etzbo l'toich pia. She burnt her finger and she stuck it in her mouth. That's what the Mishnah says. The Bartanura says, we're talking about her being metama the tana, and then she stuck her hand into the oven. If she's metama the tana or the oven. So the Bartanura says, kederech hanichvim be'etzboam. It's like this is the way of people. If they burn their finger, shanoistem etzboam b'piyam, they put their finger in their mouth. The Tiferes Yisrael writes, he writes, by somebody who gets a chavola, who gets a wound, v'chniso ha'etzba im hadam l'toich pia. She puts the wound into her mouth. The Rambam in Perek Tesvav Meilchus Tumas Oichlin Halacha Ches, he doesn't bring this, Dr. Serhai, but the Rambam says over there in Perek Tesvav Meilchus Tumas Oichlin Halacha Ches, the Rawisha Shoisa Oicheles Oichlin Shel Truma She'enon Muchshorim. She was eating food of Truma, which didn't have water come on it, so it's not royal lekabel Truma. V'hoisa Goyrefes is Atanra Hatome, and she was shoveling out the coals from an oven which was Tomei. V'hiko hakoitz v'yotza memeno dam, and it seems she got a splinter in her finger and blood came out. U'motzetzo ezbo mipnei hadam, so she sucked her finger to get the blood out of it. Oisha nichvis, or she burnt herself, and nosna ezbo b'piyah, and she put her finger in her mouth. So then it masa truma shebepiyah. Then the truma that's in her mouth became tummy. So the Rambam goes on to explain, even though he's quoting this Mishnah, Masechta Kelim, he goes on to a lengthy discussion that when you get a burn or you get a cut in your finger, you suck it in your mouth. This is what the Rambam says. So even though the Rambam in the Yad HaChazaka and Hilchas Mila doesn't say how the Metzitah has to be done, but it's assumed that Moitzitzin means Metzitah is done by sucking with your mouth. That's how you accomplish it. Now, what happened was, I started telling you about, there's this tshuva from Rav Kook, which was published in, the tshuva was published in 1908. So the first tshuva that he has was published earlier when he was still in Europe, and there he has a very lengthy discussion that the fact that the doctors claim that Metzitah is not a sakona anymore, even if you omit doing the Metzitah, he says, even though we find, like the Tiferes Yisrael claims, we find that doctors have an amonis, he says the whole amonis we find, and he quotes Chazal and Chazal and Chazal, like pages and pages and pages of all the rayas he brings from all of Shas, that a doctor's amonis is only b'toira sofik. It's only, we're choishish that maybe the doctor is right. Which means that therefore if the doctor says that the choila must eat on Yom Kippur, we let him eat, not because we're sure, because Sofik, Pikuach Nefesh, is also Doiche Yom Kippur, not because we know for sure the doctors are right. And he writes in there, interestingly, that doctors today say one thing, And then a couple of years later, it's the opposite. Eggs, sometimes eggs are good for you. A couple of years, it's healthy for you. And a couple of years, it's dangerous for you. And it changes. Every couple of years, eggs are good. And then every couple of years, they're no good, Stuff like that. But he goes on and brings all kinds of proofs that the doctors a lot of it is all, conjecture. And they keep on changing their minds because it's not a definitive science, medicine, to know for sure that this is it and that's it. That's in one of his shuvas. And then this last shuva, so Mele, therefore he says that even the Chazal tell us that not doing Metzitah is a sakona, we can trust them, we know that it's a sakona. Even though the doctors don't see how, don't see why, he says, it doesn't say in the Gemara that the child has to die right after you do the bris or you don't do Metzitah. Maybe it's a sakona for something that happens later on in life. Maybe the child will be weaker and he'll be more susceptible to getting diseases. Maybe his heart will be weaker. We don't know what the sakona is. Chazal tells it's a sakona if you omit doing the Metzitah, so we don't know what that sakona is. It could be, we don't know what it is. The Steichemet brings tshuvas from many that claim, and the Maram Zakut is one of them, where he writes that the sakona that Chazal say, even though the doctors say we don't see any physical sakona, but there is spiritual sakonas also. V'harai, we see many Gemaras, which the doctors have you're not allowed to cook meat and fish together. That's a sakona. Ask medical science today, they have no clue what that sakona is about. And even if the doctors say it's not a sakona, the halacha and the Shulchan Aruch remains the same. We don't cook meat and fish together because Chazal say it's sakona. There's other things that the Chazal tell us Gemaras, and he quotes many Gemaras, where it says, if you do this and this, it causes blindness. If you do this and this, it causes yotzei midatoi. Medical science has no clue what it's all about. Chazal tell us, regardless whether medical science says it doesn't apply, we have to listen to them anyway. This is what he writes. Now, this most recent tshuva, which was published in which was published in 1908, and I want to read you this tshuva because here's where he discusses the facts. He writes like this: Shalom Abraham, Ichtav Poiteros al Bar Shilos HaMetzitah Igiani Minisacharti Ketzas Mepnei Hatirda. I'm a little bit late because I was busy. V'gamat Oshe V'Ktzorim Roiv HaAvoida. Now I'm also going to answer very briefly because I'm very busy. V'hine Bein Misnagdei HaMetzitah, amongst those that are against the Metzitah, Yeshnan Arba Kitos. There are 4 groups that are opposed to Metzitah. Kat Achas, one group Hoimeres that says Levat Legamri Es HaMetzitah, to do away with it completely, the Metzitah. V'heim Boim B'Tainos, they come with the argument Mitzat Chochmas Refuah, because medical science says that Shoim they saw it, and the doctors say Shabisman Azem Manias HaMetzitah Ein Basakona. Leaving out Metzitah doesn't cause any danger to the child. Or Lehepech, and on the contrary, HaMetzitah Tuchal Lohoveli De Sakona De Machles Mizdapkes Yoitzevoy. Opposite is that the Metzitah itself could actually bring about different diseases, communicable diseases, and similarly, that's group number 1. Hakat Ashniya, the second group is Hoimeres that say Lekayim Es HaMetzitah. You should continue doing the Metzitah they svogoi pekulin, using a sponge or some kind of a cotton. Shenoistem al mokam achatach, that you put on the wound. V'oimrim, and they say shagamze moitzes adam. This also accomplishes sucking out the blood. Hakata shlishis, the third group, shehem roitzim limtzois hayidei mechuna. They want to perform the Metzitah with this device. Asuya hayidei lechitza sa'aver. It comes through suction, a suction device, which was Dr. Tertes's invention. And the fourth group, Shoimeres, that say limtzos hayidei hapeh, that you should do the Metzitah by mouth. Avol but hayidei hefsek shel shveiferes shel zchuchis, you use a separation between your mouth and the mekoim hamila. You use a glass tube kedei lemaneya hachashash shel sakona, in order to do away with the possibility of the communicable diseases. These are the 4 groups. V'hinei ima chafetzim la'akar es kol ha-Metzitah kula. The first group that wants to do away with Metzitah completely, I don't want to even talk to them. There's nothing to talk to them about. We can't move away. We can't budge from the words of our sages. They said, a more that doesn't do Metzitah, we fire him. Shabbos Kuf Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis. They say, but the nature changes. We find many times that nature in health issues do tend to change. And over there, many places. However, There's nothing in the words of those that oppose the Metzitah. There's nothing to talk about. Choda, firstly, every place where we say that the nature has changed, in order to know, to be able to claim that the nature of humans have changed, you have to have a clear proof, you have to have it tested and proven to be for sure. They do not have any birah to show, they have no proof to show that times have changed. And not just that, all the doctors are believed. That's when he goes back to his previous two chuvas. And we rely on the doctors that we rely on them. Only we don't say that everything they say is true. We have a doubt. They might be right, and if they might be right, we have to al-sofik nefoshes. We have to be mekel. Over there in Hilchas Nida, there's an issue where we trust, we're choishish for the doctors. Something which is we have no proof that we assume that what the doctors are saying is definitive. Therefore, since the Chazal said that is a sakona, if you don't do Metzitah, we have to know for sure sakona in order to be able to say times have changed. And they're not trusted in this at all. And therefore, even if they think up from their own minds that there's a chash sakona, we say ein sofik shalahem, their sofik that doing Metzitah might cause danger to the child is not moitzi midei vadai shal Chazal. Chazal say that if you don't do Metzitah, it causes danger, and if you do Metzitah, it averts the danger, and they say that doing Metzitah causes the change. Their saying is only a sofik, Chazal saying is vadai. Their sofik does not have the power to undo that which the Chazal say is for sure. Their chashoshes that it causes danger is only dimyonis, and it's sveikas ba'alma, it's doubts that they have. This is only when you want to do away completely, the first group that wants to completely eradicate doing Metzitah. But if they do the Metzitah in some form and fashion, we have no proof that what they're saying is against the Chazal. And all this that there's an arichis in later books has no foundation. He's referring to Dr. Tertus's book. He says using a suction device, you can't call that Metzitah. It does not draw out the blood from the koimas or chekim. V'ne'eman oleinu harambam shuv v'debor b'shulchan aruch siman reish samachdalet sheyisoid ha-metzitzu kedei sheyetzi adam me'ha-mekoimas or chekim. It has to be a strong suction of the dam in order to get it out from the far off places. U'b'zeh yofe koyach ha-mechuna mi-koyach ha-sfug. So the machine is even better than the sponge. U'mikol mokum, however, gam hi eino betucha kol kach. That's also not sure that it works. Shetifoil yofe espulosa. The suction device is also not for sure that it does it properly. We can't rely in place of sakona on demyonis of new innovations, of demyonis, of assumptions of those that want to make new innovations. Aval, but what if they do Metzitah orally? But they use a tube, they use the mouth, but they use it through a tube in order that if there's a communicable disease, it should not go from Mohel to child or from child to Mohel. It seems then you have to know what is the intention behind the change. If it appears that the reason why they have this innovation, that they want to use the tube, is because they're looking for an excuse. They want to undo the customs that we did. They want to be changed from the minhagi aviseinu that always did it the pam. That's why they're suggesting that we use a tube. Then we have to stand against them, not to allow them to change anything from that which our forefathers had in days of yore, which was their custom, to do metzitza by mouth without using the tube. But if it appears sheyeshom ezach shash sakona, if you have a situation where there seems to be a chash sakona mitzad hamoitzeitz, that the Mohel who's doing the metzitza has some kind of issue, nogua, that he's diseased be'eza machla bepnimius gufoi, or befiv, or beshinov, either he has an internal disease like tuberculosis, or befiv, or he has some kind of a disease in his mouth, or beshinov, or in his teeth, or mitzad hayeled, or the child might have some kind of disease, shiyuchal lahazik la'moitzitz, which could cause damage to the Mohel that's doing the Metzitah. In such a situation, we have no foundation to be strict, to be stringent, to say we can't say that it's not a kosher Metzitah. But you have to be very careful that the suction should be completely closed through soft cotton, in order that the one who's doing the Metzitah could do a strong Metzitah, that the blood should come out, and like the Rambam writes, not to use the tube on a regular basis, only in a situation where the doctors say either the Mohel is sick or the child is sick, or this is the tshuva. B'kitzer, what he says is, you can't use any of the other methods, forget about it. Using the tube, only in a situation where the Mohel has a disease, or the child might be diseased, but to use a standard procedure, he outlaws it completely. This is Rav Kook's tshuva. Now, incidentally, there's no tshuva in Igros Moshe about how to do Metzitah b'peh. However, I spoke to Rav Moshe about this shaila myself, and his grandson Mordechai Tendler took notes of everything I spoke to him. He sat there, took notes. And he has it in his notebooks, and he actually published one volume of notes of people that spoke to Rav Moshe and whatever Rav Moshe said to them. So he was kind enough to give me a photocopy of the part of his notebook which has the things that I discussed with Rav Moshe. And this is approximately 30-some years ago when I discussed the shaila with him. And it seems from his notes that what I had asked him was, the Divrei Malkiel was Rav in Lomje, writes in his Tshuva Sefer in Chelik Dalet Siman Pei-Vov that a Mohel that doesn't do Metzitah b'peh has a din of a mummer l'dover echad. And even when he does do Metzitah b'peh, the bris is posel, because if somebody is a mummer to a mitzvah, he's called posel. That's what he writes. So it seems that I asked Rav Moshe what's his opinion about this Tshuva in the Divrei Malkiel. And I'm quoting, this is from Mordechai Tendler's handwriting. I'm reading it straight up. What? I'm reading you his notes. This is what he writes. Concerning a Mohel that doesn't do Metzitah by mouth, Shashoyel Hiskir, the one who asked him, which is myself, mentioned, he passes this Mohel. Omar Moiri Sabi, my grandfather said, that nowadays ein din zeh shaladivrei malkiel, but it doesn't apply. The Mohel is still kosher. Even if he doesn't do Metzitah b'peh, you can still use him. Batuach ef shalapoy, or betach, and for sure ef shalapoy, you can't pass the Mohel. The Mohel Metzitah they kone. What if he does Metzitah using a tube? Bichlali ef shalahagit shoyser shloikadin. You can't even say that he's doing shloikadin if he uses a tube. The hine amakor lahagid sheyesh inyan shemetzitah yadavka b'peh. The source why Metzitah, to say the Metzitah has to be orally, dafka done by mouth, hu miloshan Rashi, so miloshan of a Rashi. The we have no proof Rashi kiven that Rashi had intention shezeh inyan dafka that it has to be done orally. V'sheyesh eza hakpoda noisefes b'zeh, and there is another hakpoda added to this. V'im yesh, and if there is, ulai maybe rak havegam kein mitzad havonas hitztarchos l'rfuah. Maybe whatever other hakpoda there is to do with mouth by mouth is only for the understanding that you need it for medicinal purposes. The yodua that it's known shehatamu amiti lemetzitza that the real reason, the true reason for Metzitah hu rak mitzad refuah, it's only a medicinal purpose. V'nase k'hakpoda, and it became like hakpoda la'aso is dafka b'peh. It became hakpoda that you have to do it by mouth, rak only kedei la'afuke mehor reformi. Only because the Reform Jews started arguing against it, that's when it became necessary. And I remember him saying this. He's saying, which in fact what he's saying is, in other words, even the Metzitah does not have to be done by mouth. But since the Reform Jews try to change it, then it's hakpoda, you must do it dafka by mouth, because again, like the Maram Shik writes, it says din of Arkas of the Masana, that it's Yehorig Val Yavar, you can't change anything if the Reform Jews want to change it. Shemotzu inyan zeh, they found this inyan of Metzitah b'peh, they liga al menhoge Yisrael, in order to do away with Jewish customs, betainas sheker, with arguments of falsehood, sheyesh bezeh chashash sakona, that there's a concern of sakona in this. Machbas heim, because of them, the Reformed Jews, nasa hakpoda, it became hakpoda dafka lasas b'peh, that you must only do Metzitah by mouth. V'hinei. Hayoim, nowadays, be'emes nishkach kol hatumul hazeh. This whole tumul became forgotten. Nobody, I remember him saying he was surprised when I asked him, the Shaili says, who today argues against doing Metzitah b'peh? He was like surprised that there's still somebody around today. You know, we've already separated ourselves from Reformed Jews. We've distanced ourselves so far from them. There's nobody today that's still considering what the Reformed Jews say. So, like, why am I even asking him about this? However, even if the Reformed Jews aren't arguing again, it's still better to do Metzitah b'peh mamish. Unless the Mohel is somewhat sick or similar. And my grandfather added, he remembers Pam one time, Rav Zimmerman was a famous Mohel in New York. And the father of the child, came to the Mohel, and the father of the baby insisted that Rabbi Zimmerman should do it with the tube, should do the Metzitah with a tube. There's more sakona than there is the mile of refuah that Chazal mentioned. That's what the father argued with Rabbi Zimmerman. And then they said to the Mohel, he should listen, don't argue with him, do it the way he wants, don't argue with him. But nowadays, said Rav Moshe, this I'm quoting Mordechai Tendler's notes. But nowadays, we don't hear about this anymore, that fathers should make an issue and not let the Mohel do Metzitah b'peh. Even by the Fraya, by non-religious Jews, they let the Mohel do his job, and they don't look in and what he does. End of this shaila, end of this discussion. This is what he writes. So again, Rav Moshe writes that if there are those that come and their intention is to do away with Metzitah b'peh, then you're mechuyev to do Metzitah b'peh, just like Rav Kook writes. Now, interestingly, the Rav of Kahal Das Yeshurun, which is the Washington Heights, Frankfurt Kehillah, as you all know, recently was Rav Schwab Zecher Tzadik L'Brocha, and he has a sefer called Mayan Beis HaSho'eva. It's a sefer on Chumash, and in that sefer he writes, and I'm quoting the sefer. He writes in Parshas Vayigash. You can actually look it up. I'm quoting it verbatim. V'shas hachnosas haben lebriso shel Avram Avinu. At the time when one brings his son into bris shel Avram Avinu, makpidim al Metzitah b'peh, or makpid to do Metzitah by mouth. This is what he writes. Laharois hakesher ben kedushas haloshoin lekedushas bris hamoer. I'm quoting. This is what he writes in the sefer. So it seems that Rav Schwab also felt that way. Now, I once asked Rabbi Yankov Kamenetsky, who was a Rav in Toronto, as many of you know, and later became Rosh Yeshiva in Torah Vodaas. I asked him his opinion about Metzitah b'peh also. And what he said to me was as follows. He says in Slobodka, which is where he learned, Slobodka was the yeshiva in Europe where Rav Yankov learned, and Rav Aaron Kotler learned there, Rav Hutner learned there, Rav Ruderman learned there. Famous Slobodka yeshiva. The Rosh Yeshiva there was Rav Moshe Mordechai Epstein, was the Rosh Yeshiva. And there was one Mohel in town that did all the brisin. And the Mohel, the Rosh Yeshiva was always Sandik. All the brisin, that Mohel did the brisin, the Rosh Yeshiva was the Sandik, and the Mohel did not do Metzitah b'peh, ever. Never did Metzitah b'peh. And after every bris, the Rosh Yeshiva hat him ungeschrigen. means the Rosh Yeshiva hollered at him and protested why he didn't do Metzitah B'Peh. This is what he told me.
How did he do it?
What?
How did he do the Metzitah?
He didn't tell me, so I don't know. He didn't tell me how he did it. This is what he just. This I'm just telling you over. I'm not editorializing. I'm just telling you. I'm quoting what he said to me. Then he said to me like this. He said, if it would not require to put your mouth over the Mekoim Hamila, Chazal would not have told you to do something as despicable as putting the Ever HaMeshuketz into your mouth. Chazal would not have told you to do it if it would not have been necessary to do it. This is what he told me. Now, there's a tshuva sefer from Moshe Mordechai Epstein called the Levush Mordechai, and in there, he says that it's not just Mishum Sakona like Rav Moshe says, and like the Tiferes Yisrael says, and like the Tzais HaChoshon says, and the Derech B'Kudecha, which is the Bnei Yisosra. Many say that it's only Mishum Sakona. There are many that say it's an integral part of the Mitzvah Milah. Some say it's Halachal Moshe Misinai, whatever. But in there, he says this argument that if it wouldn't be necessary to put your mouth on top of the Mekoim HaMilah, Chazal never would have told us to do something as despicable as doing that. Obviously, it's an integral part of the Mitzvah Milah. This is what he claims, and that's the way it has to be done. I guess based on Rav Kook's tshuva, we have to know if the Mohel is healthy, and then he says you can't even use the tube to do the milah. If the Mohel is not healthy, then you do use the tube, he says, not on a regular basis. You only use it in the situation where the Mohel is not healthy or the child might have a problem. Now, when the AIDS epidemic came about, so there were many Gedolei Yisrael, including Rabbi Yashiv, who was of the opinion that you should use the tube at that time, while that epidemic was a major concern. Recently, as of 2005, there is a tshuva from Rabbi Yashiv, and I actually saw the tshuva myself in his own handwriting. It wasn't something that somebody else wrote and he signed, but it's actually in his own handwriting, that particular tshuva. And I want to read it to you, what he writes. By the way, the Mishnah Berurah in Siman Shin Lamed Aleph and Hilchos Shabbos, the first Biur Halacha, writes, he quotes the Binyan Tzion that says the Metzitah has to be done orally, and he quotes the Yad HaLozar that says it could be done using some other method. He obviously didn't see the tshuva inside, because he's quoting the Pesachei Tshuva over there, and the Pesachei Tshuva is quoting the Pesachei Olam. It's both the same lashon, so I know that he says himself it's the Pesachei Tshuva. And Rabbi Lozer Waldenberg, who is one of the Rabbonim in Yerushalayim, the Rabbonot, he writes in the Tzitz Eliezer, his Tshuva Sefer, that the Chofetz Chaim obviously didn't see the Tshuvas because he should have printed the Yad Lozer first and the Bin Tzion after, if he's quoting it altogether, the Yad HaLozar, because the Binyan Tzion disproves all of the arguments in the Yad HaLozar. That's what he writes. So he should have at least put it the other way, which would seem that he's agreeing with the Binyan Tzion, not with the Yad HaLozar. Although he doesn't say avol, so it doesn't mean that really he agrees with either one. There's no way to know what the Chofetz Chaim's opinion on the subject was. The Be'er Moshe, the Rebbetziner Rav, writes in his Tshuva Sefer that Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan, and who it seems was maskim to use the tube when necessary, and Reb Chaim Oizer in Vilna. Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan was in Kovna, Reb Chaim Oizer in Vilna, in the Litta. He writes, the Be'er Moshe, that they said, and including, he quotes Rabbi Eliezer Silver there also. Probably Rabbi Eliezer Silver told him what Reb Chaim Oizer said, because I know he was close to Reb Chaim Oizer, and I don't think that the Rebbetziner Rav ever met Reb Chaim Oizer. He says that Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan and Reb Chaim Oizer and Rabbi Eliezer Silva said that all the Frum Yidden in the Litta did Metzitah B'Peh. It was only the modern ones that started using the tube. This is what he writes over there in the Sefer. Now, Rabbi Yashiv in his tshuva that was printed in 2005 writes that you must do Metzitah B'Peh, and he writes, if the Mohel has a problem and he has a disease, then you do Metzitah B'Peh al Yedei Achar. You have somebody else do the Metzitah B'Peh. He doesn't say to use the tube. And he writes that all the tinnitus that the doctors nowadays have, and this 205 is quite recently when the herpes virus epidemic supposedly became a major issue, there's a tshuva from Rabbi Yashiv and from Rav Vosner and Bnei Brak, where they both write that they checked it out, and there were medical doctors, infectious disease specialists that testified that there's no truth to the epidemic being spread by Metzitah b'peh. And whenever there was an instance of they have as many girls that had the virus, the herpes virus, as they had boys having the herpes virus, which is some kind of an indication the girls didn't have Metzitah b'peh, so it couldn't have come from the Mohel. And whenever there was a Mohel that did Metzitah b'peh and the baby also had herpes virus, either the mother also had herpes virus, which they had such an instance where the child actually died, but the mother had an active herpes virus in her mouth at the time, and they refused to do a DNA to prove where the virus came to the child. So Rabbi Yashiv writes there that if the doctor, if the Mohel who's doing the Metzitah has a problem, is not healthy, or has questionable as far as health is concerned, you do the Metzitah b'peh al yedei achai, have somebody else do it, and it's in his own handwriting, this tshuva, and Rabbi Bolton writes the same thing. So I guess the bottom line here is, this is the history. I'm only giving you the history.